Welcome back, everyone, to the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Rossinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go in to the breach on the Veritas Catholic Radio Network, 1350 on your AM dial, 103.9 on your FM dial, spreading the truth of the Catholic faith to the New York City metropolitan area. As always, we remind you to please download the Veritas Catholic Network Radio mobile app so that you can have access to all of our station's content. And if you like what Joe and I do, you can also follow us on social media. We're at the Frontline TV or the Frontline with Joe and Joe, primarily on YouTube. Like, subscribe, share, and do all that fun stuff. And now I start every show by saying how we are going into the breach. And when you're rolling up your sleeves and you have to get into what is the preeminent moral issue of our time, okay, you are in the breach, and that is abortion. And we brought on Alexandra DeSanctis to talk to us about her new book, Tearing Us Apart, How Abortion Harms Everything and Solves Nothing. Now, some of you out there may know Alexandra. Quick bio, and we're going to jump right into it because we only have Alexandra for a half hour today. Alexandra DeSanctis is a staff writer for National Review and a visiting fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center. She was previously a William F. Buckley Fellow in Political Journalism with the National Review Institute and is a graduate of the University of Notre Dame. Alexandra DeSanctis, welcome to the front line with Joe and Joe.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be with you.
It's our honor. I'm going to hand it over to Joe and we'll get started.
We'll start with a quick prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, never was it known that anyone who sought your help or sought your intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, we fly unto you, a virgin of virgins, our mother. To you we come, before you we stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not our petitions, but in your clemency hear and answer us, amen. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Alexandra, I love the title of the book because it's bold. And this is a great, great way to begin the conversation. You argue in this book that abortion has undermined our society's vision of what it means to be human. You also argue that abortion has harmed every element of our society. That is 100% correct. I want you to elaborate on that. And because, like I said, it's a bold statement. It has to be said more because it's true.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for starting there, because the kind of, I think what makes our book unique is that pro-lifers have been saying for decades now, or, throughout human history, I suppose, that life begins at conception, that every human life is valuable, has dignity, has moral worth, and deserves to be protected. And that's 100% true, right? That's the fundamental harm of abortion, is that the unborn child is killed. But if that's true, right, if we know that that's the case, how could that not harm our society? How could we not all be deeply harmed by the fact that we're killing innocent human beings by the hundreds of thousands every year, that this killing, this legalized killing, is enshrined in our society, is widely accepted, that people think this is morally acceptable, that our law considers it acceptable? That must harm every aspect of our society, including the mothers who choose abortion, the doctors who perform abortions, the politicians who advocate abortion, and on down the list.
Alexandra, let me ask you a question. You know that over the last 50 years, not that we're in the business of winning arguments. We're not in the business of winning arguments. We're in the business of recognizing the value of every human life. That's what we're trying to emphasize. But on one level, we've won every argument. Okay. Now, I want to know if you agree with this, because I say we've won every argument. That's why you're seeing such a shrill reaction from the left in particular. Okay. When it comes to the leaked decision from the Supreme Court and just the prospect of Roe versus Wade getting overturned, they know they have nothing left other than violence. It seems that way to me. That seems to be the direction they're going, is they're shouting their abortion. Like you see them, they shout their abortion. They're proud of it. They know that they lost the scientific argument, the philosophical argument, the moral argument, the legal. They're about to go down in flames on the legal argument. Okay. Talk about that. Is that all they have left? In other words, they're showing their lack of a value for human life in their reaction to them not being able to legally terminate human life. Am I wrong in my assessment?
No, I think you're on the right track. And to me, we've seen this spate of violence in the wake of this leaked, draft opinion. And I think that's kind of the best sign yet, that they don't have any argument left, that they think they can win. And you hear a lot of times from abortion supporters, if Roe's overturned, abortion will be illegal. That's simply factually not the case, right? If Roe's overturned the way we expect it to be any day now, the decision is going to go back to each state. All 50 states are going to set their own abortion law. And so pro-lifers for the past 50 years have been saying, let's just fight for the opportunity to pass laws to protect unborn children. We'll just fight one step at a time and do the best we can. But abortion supporters, conversely, are not saying that, right? They're not saying, okay, if we lose at the Supreme Court, we'll just go to the states, we'll pass as many, pro-abortion laws as we can, we'll fight in the court of public opinion as hard as we can. They don't want to do that. They want to keep abortion enshrined at the national level, abortion on demand, through the entire country with no pro-life laws forced on the entire country by the Supreme Court, because they know they have a bad argument, right? And so at the prospect of losing that kind of regime that's been imposed by the Supreme Court for 50 years now, they're terrified. And all they have left to do is try to shoot people and break the windows at pro-life centers across the country.
Well, we pray that that doesn't come to that. We are speaking with Alexandra DeSanctis at the Frontline with Joe and Joe on the Veritas Catholic Network. Her book, out from Regnery Press, is Tearing Us Apart: How Abortion Harms Everything and Solves Nothing. Joe Rossinello.
Well, let's talk about a post-Roe America. I mean, I think it's going to happen, but I read something in First Things that really made me think. I mean, obviously, getting rid of Roe, there's still going to be abortion in America. Certain states are going to embrace it, as we just stated. What I'd like to talk about is basically, how does our government help women, particularly financially, to keep their children? I mean, this is another aspect that I think that the right isn't talking about, but it has to be talked about, because listen, not everybody is in a financial good place. And I mean, a lot of times that's what drives women to get these abortions. They don't want to abort their child. They shouldn't. Obviously, a lot of them don't know about resources like the Sisters of Life, Good Counsel Homes, places like that. But at the same time, our country doesn't value large families anymore. Our country, they talk about, child care, but that's not the answer either. What is your thoughts on this? Because, we have to be a culture of life, and it's not just about ending abortion legally. Obviously, we want to do that. That's our first step. But then what do we do next?
Yeah, well, that's the $1 million question, I think. And pro-lifers have been grappling with that for decades now. But this is kind of the moment of decision here. If we hopefully are moving forward into a post-Roe America, that's going to be the pressing question, right? And we talk about this, Ryan Anderson and I, in the conclusion of the book, that this needs to be a both and approach by the pro-life movement, right? We want to both deal with kind of the demand for abortion. We want to reduce demand for abortion, and we want to reduce the supply of abortion. So that's kind of regulating abortion, eliminating it as much as possible, but also making it unthinkable, right? We're always going to have abortion if, as you put it, there are women who are in a situation that makes them think abortion's their only option. And so making abortion illegal is not the only solution here, although that's, of course, a necessary step. But the problem is that's a very complex issue to solve, right? There's not just one thing you can hand women to make them not want abortions anymore. And part of it might be, money. Maybe it's a federal program. A lot of our pro-life friends on the kind of left-leaning side would say maybe we need more federal money for families, federal money for parents of children. With many children, or maybe it's a program at the state level. I think all this should be up for debate. From my perspective, I think the most effective thing is kind of a grassroots level pro-life, resource centers, communities, churches kind of stepping up and, like you say, affirming the importance of big families, walking alongside parents in need. And I think that's 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10 going to be more effective than a government program. But Ryan and I do believe all this ought to be up for debate, charitable debate amongst pro-lifers.
Well, it should, but my fear in that, and I agree with both of you. Okay, I don't want to come across. I want to preface this by saying I'm not trying to be cold about this, but at the end of the day, okay, I'm under no moral obligation. I want to say this I am from Jesus Christ. Okay, let's be clear, and I'm supposed to help anybody, and I want to help these women. But they're using it as an excuse. And yes, this is an us and them thing. Okay, those who want to kill babies and those who do not and want to protect human life. Okay, I'm under no obligation. Okay, I didn't force the woman to get pregnant. She has reproductive freedom. I like to break the news to them. Okay, it was before she walked, and I'm not blaming just the woman, please. But where I'm going with that is that you're right. It's got to be on the table. It's got to be up for debate. I think we should be open-minded to it. But again, on a state level, how about this for a start? How about we start promoting big families? Joe and I are old enough to remember Alexandra DeSanctis joining us at the Frontline with Joe and Joe when things happen in families, like the young teenage girl gets pregnant and abortion was unthinkable, there was big families there to support her. Okay. She could stay in school. She could get a job. She could do all the things she needs to do. We don't do that anymore. We've destroyed everything that's necessary in this country so that that woman would have a support system, namely a large family. So I agree with you. I'm sorry. That's my little diatribe, Alexandra. I apologize because everybody's like, well, we have to help these people. Let's help them by convincing them first not to kill their babies, and then let's move forward from there. Joe Rossinello.
Well, let's talk about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, because clearly we all know her position on abortion, but she said something. She said it, not me, not Joe Pasillo, that I think is very interesting, and it's not explored enough. She said, basically, the modern abortion movement has embraced an effort to avoid populations that we don't want to have too many of. Now, that is a disturbing statement. Very disturbing statement. People don't talk about this. They don't talk about the majority of women who have abortions are African American and Latino. They don't talk about that Planned Parenthood clinics. I think it's in the 80 percentile. Please correct me if I'm wrong, any of our listeners. I know it's well above 50% are in walking distance from poor and minority neighborhoods. And that is what she's alluding to. Please speak to that, because no one talks about that, and that has to be brought up.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really glad you raised that. And that's something we dive into in great detail in the third chapter of our book. We talk about not only kind of the current status quo of how abortion happens in our country, which you just alluded to, but also the history of the pro-abortion movement, as they would put it, the abortion rights movement. Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, was not, a pro-abortion activist by any means. Her views on abortion were kind of hazy, and in some instances she said she might be okay with it in some circumstances, and others she said she didn't think it was a solution. So that's not super clear, but we do know that she and her fellow eugenicists had a program of legalized birth control, of forcible sterilization, coerced sterilization, that they were promoting partly through Planned Parenthood, because they wanted to reduce what they saw as unfit populations, which is non-white populations, people they thought were, not of high intelligence or whatever other moniker you want to put to it. They wanted to preserve white Yankee stock. They were eugenicists. And this was a very prominent movement in the progressive, like the 1920s progressive movement. And that is what has sort of morphed into the pro-abortion movement. Once abortion became kind of this linchpin of the second wave feminists, a lot of eugenicists sort of cottoned on to that. And, that's not to say that Planned Parenthood today is hoping to exterminate non-white people. I don't think that most Planned Parenthood employees have that in mind at all, if any, but that's certainly how abortion plays out. And the statistic you mentioned, it is true. Upwards of 80% of Planned Parenthood clinics are located in walking distance of low income or minority neighborhoods. And one horrible statistic I often point to is that in recent years in New York City, more Black babies have been aborted than born alive. And the scary thing is that when you point to that as a pro-lifer, abortion advocates say that's a good thing, right? These women need abortion and they're getting it. And I say that's horrible, right? Abortion is not a solution. And the fact that these populations are choosing abortion at a higher rate is an evil, awful thing that we should be very concerned about.
During Bloomberg,
DeSanctis, I want to hear. Go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, during Bloomberg's term, I don't know if it was what term it was. He obviously served 3 as the mayor of New York. That was a billboard that was made to come down. He made it come down, stating that fact. That is a fact. And to your point, I have seen this argued on MSNBC, saying that this is a good thing, that they're going to be hurt the most. How could that possibly help minority women? How? And if you can't identify, everyone's talking about systemic racism. That's the largest example of systemic racism there is. It's not in Darien, Connecticut, that the abortion clinic is. It's not in wealthy communities in New Jersey or Westchester.
Joe, let me piggyback off that to ask Alexandra a question. Alexandra DeSanctis joining us here at the Frontline with Joe and Joe. The book that she has written with Ryan Anderson, Tearing Us Apart, How Abortion Harms Everything and Solves Nothing. Am I wrong, Alexandra, to ask, why do we not remind these people? Now, like you said, do some of the rank and file at Planned Parenthood know what they're doing is pretty much blatantly racist? Okay, probably not. Sorry, I'm not as merciful or charitable when it comes to those who run Planned Parenthood and who are responsible for big abortion in this country. Why is it that you mentioned slavery? All right, you can mention the Holocaust, the language that they use to support abortion. and to justify abortion is the same language that was used by the Nazis and the slave owners. They justified it by the dehumanization of the human person. Yes, the human person. I know that bugs a lot of people out there. Oh, it's a clump of cells. No, it's not. It's a human person. Okay. It should be recognized as such from the moment of conception, because every point after that is arbitrary. Okay. And there should be nothing arbitrary in the way we look at abortion. Now, my question was, why do we not point out to them, to let them know, to edify them perhaps? Okay. The language that they use is the same as the biggest butchers in history. They dehumanize the victim, and then they seek to make it legal to kill that victim, or in the case of slavery, enslave that victim. Am I wrong, Alexandra DeSanctis, in my assessment of that? And why don't we point this out to them more often?
Yeah, I think there are obviously some very clear parallels there, striking and horrible parallels. And I have seen a bit of this in the pro-life movement. In particular, I would cite the work of the Radiance Foundation, which is run by Ryan Baumberger and his wife, Bethany, and they draw a lot of attention to kind of the disparity in the abortion rate between white and Black populations, or non-white and white populations. That would be one. And there's a huge movement of African-American pro-lifers who are just, all they do is focus on this disproportionate abortion rate in their own communities. And they do speak a lot about slavery. They call it a Black genocide. They call abortion a Black genocide. So it is out there. And I fear that the problem is it doesn't get attention because pro-abortion, kind of the loudest voices in our media, our politicians, won't talk about it. They don't want to talk about it in those terms. But your point is exactly right. And we talk about not only the kind of race aspect, like I mentioned in our book, but our first chapter talks a lot about what you mentioned, dehumanization and the depersonification of the unborn child, right? And we make the point that this has been done throughout human history, always by the oppressors, right? There is not a single example in human history of an argument to dehumanize a human person, or to remove personhood from a human being, used in the name of justice, equality, freedom, right? They've always been used in the name of oppression, to harm the vulnerable, to enslave, to exterminate. That's always what these arguments are used for, and it's happening again with abortion.
Right, so it's so unfortunate. Alexandra DeSanctis, you can't imagine how happy we are, Joe and I, that you're on the show to talk about this, and you've written this book with Ryan Anderson. We encourage everyone to go out and buy it. We still have some more questions for you that we're going to pepper you with, but real quick, where could folks buy the book?
They can buy it at either Amazon or Barnes & Noble. It'll be out June 28th, so you can pre-order now or buy it once it's on the shelves.
Absolutely. Alexandra DeSanctis has written the book with Ryan Anderson, Tearing Us Apart, How Abortion Harms Everything and Solves Nothing. Joe Resinello, where do you want to go?
You hear the word science, everything's science. But, you explore this in the book, and I think we need to talk about it. You basically say how major medical organizations have lied about the reality of abortion, and they've turned themselves into partisan activist groups. We've seen this in the transgender movement with children. Our current president said on CNN that he supports 8-year-olds transitioning. I have an 8-year-old daughter. If someone suggested that to me, I'd have a stroke. I'm just going to be completely honest with you. That doesn't seem like it's science that's speaking there. It sounds like it's Rachel Maddow that's speaking, and she doesn't strike me as a scientist. I mean, talk about this. I mean, getting back to like the transgender movement, Vanderbilt says no. Johns Hopkins says no. They're scientists. You're talking about scientists who are also becoming activists in the abortion movement. Please explore the idea.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one because I think a lot of the times we hear from abortion supporters, oh, pro-lifers are anti-science, right? And this is the craziest argument I think they have. It's so obvious that human life starts at the moment of conception, right? And then we can go on to have a debate about the ethical and moral implications of that, right? About personhood, maybe if we have to, these kind of philosophical debates about whether that human being has moral worth. But they're often the ones claiming this isn't even a human being. Okay, they want to say this is just a clump of cells or a parasite or part of the mother. And then they also want to be the pro-science ones. It's just simply crazy. They're not pro-science. They're rejecting science. Upwards of 95% of biologists affirm that life begins at conception. And they deny this regularly, right? But as you mentioned, we talk a bit in the book about the way kind of the medical field has been co-opted by abortion, or in fact has been a primary mover of the pro-abortion movement. I think we have this conception of legal abortion as being a women's issue, a women's rights issue. Feminists were behind the push for legal abortion in the 60s and 70s. But we explore in the book in great detail how major medical organizations were actually the primary movers of the push for legal abortion leading up to Roe v. Wade. And they lobbied the Supreme Court very heavily and quite successfully. They made perhaps the most successful arguments pushing the justices to legalize abortion in the name of doctors' freedom, right, of the ability of doctors to perform abortions. And the idea was, well, when abortion was illegal in all these states before Roe, the people being punished were the doctors, not women. There were no states that were punishing women for getting abortions. States punished doctors for performing abortions. And so these groups of doctors, whether it was the American Medical Association or American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, the kind of elite level of doctors, ignoring the many pro-life doctors below them, just decided we're going to lobby for legal abortion on the grounds that this is a matter of our medical judgment and us getting to exercise our medical judgment free from legal penalty. And so they lobbied the court and they were successful. And you'll see today, these groups are still among the loudest pro-abortion voices out there.
Well, that's why we have to be louder. We don't control the media. We just don't. And
that comes easy for us, Alexandra. We're two crazy Italian people.
I am too. Add me to the list.
Good. I like it. That's why we get along well.
You just joined the club, whether you like it or not. Alexandra DeSanctis joining us at the Frontline with Joe and Joe, tearing us apart, how abortion harms everything and solves nothing. And Alexandra, this I think is, although it's a quick conversation, about a half-hour conversation, nonetheless, we're trying to. We have, first of all, we do have to open our mouths, all right? But we also have to be educated too. We have to convince our pro-life brothers and sisters, okay? Again, not just Catholics, all those out there fighting for life, okay? We have that in common. We have our differences. This should be a unifier for us, okay? All those who value life, the Alveda kings of the world, okay? Who is not Catholic, but who's on the front line with Father Frank Pavone, okay? And people like that. What we need to do is we need to be, I think, fearless in our defense of the unborn, and open our mouths wherever we can, because they do have MSNBC, they do have CNN, they have the New York Times, and people can't just dismiss that and say, well, we know that. Well, we know it, but we can't really do anything about it. And their message still gets out there. Okay. So even in our small ways, at Frontline with Joe and Joe or other podcasts or wherever it might be, we have to open our mouth. Alexandra, talk about the need in this culture war, because that's what abortion is, just a front in the larger culture war. I think you would agree with that. Okay. I don't want to put words in your mouth. In this culture war, the need to really not fear anything, to be fearless in the defense of the unborn. I'll speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, we talk about this a bit in the book too, in our conclusion, because I think a lot of times when we talk about abortion or think about it, people can feel very overwhelmed, and rightly so, right? What can I do to possibly stop this huge, horrendous evil? And so the way we put it in the book is no one can do everything, right? But each of us can do something. And it will depend a bit on our state in life. Maybe it's volunteering at a pregnancy resource center. Maybe it's donating to one. Maybe it's, welcoming a new life into your family under difficult circumstances. You name it, right? There's countless things we can do, but it is important for all of us to do something. And this is what motivated us to write the book, because we were thinking we're heading into a kind of the brave new future of the pro-life movement here. Let's arm people with the arguments they need so that they can talk about this confidently. And we have to start with the case that this kills innocent human beings, the dignity of every human life. We have to start there, but we have to go beyond that too, right? And we have to be able to talk to the people around us about the fact that abortion actually does harm them. And there's this attitude of, well, it's not my problem. I wouldn't get an abortion. I don't want my daughter to get an abortion, but let's just kind of let people do their own thing. It's not the place of government. That's not true. Abortion has harmed all of us. And I think it's really important for all of us to understand that, to internalize that, and then to be motivated by that reality to convince other people that it's true as well.
I want to, and we have to make sure that people go out and buy your book, Tearing Us Apart, How Abortion Harms Everything and Solves Nothing. I'm going to make one quick comment. We probably only have enough time for maybe a question or two, which I'll hand over to Joe Resinello. If people want something to do, now again, I'm going to throw a statistic out there to you, Alexandra. Maybe you've not, maybe you could confirm that for me. If people want something to do in this battle, okay, for life, really, okay, innocent human life. Now, these are from people that I spoke to a lot with when I used to go down in New York City. I'm not in New York City anymore, at Old St. Patrick's Cathedral, and we used to process down to Planned Parenthood, okay? Sometimes confronted by the crazies, and I call them the crazies affectionately, and sometimes not. However, in speaking to people who have been on the ground for years, they told me that when there are prayer warriors in front of an abortion clinic, okay, the no-show rate at Planned Parenthood is about 75%. Now, does that mean the woman who decides not to go because she sees a bunch of Catholics out there praying the rosary won't make a new appointment? We don't know. to the scourge. So, your quick comment on that. If people want to do something, I think that's a perfect place to start. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so too. And I don't know that statistic in particular, but I do know that sidewalk counselors make a huge difference, just kind of telling women on their way in, here's a pamphlet, here are other options. You don't have to choose abortion, right? You don't need to get in the woman's face. You don't need to be insulting, as the abortion movement tries to portray pro-lifers. That's by and large not what's happening, but just kind of standing there and saying there is another way, right? You can choose life and I'll help you. I think that makes a big difference.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Alexandra DeSanctis. We probably have time for one more question.
Alexandra, you said something recently about how it's not like good for women. Abortion is not good for women. Now, you said like maybe it's not good for me, but it's not my choice to impose myself. But it hurts women. That's, I think, one of their biggest like lies. It's pro women. No, it's not pro women. Women are hurt after they have abortion psychologically. I mean, go through some of the, I guess like issues that they cope with after women have abortion, because it doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, whether you're a Democrat or you're a Republican, whether you're Catholic or you're not Catholic. If you have an abortion and you're a woman, you are going to be hurt by it. Please educate our listeners about that truth.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talk about this in great detail in the second chapter of the book. And I think it's really important, maybe the most important thing to learn how to talk about, because the most common pro-abortion argument is that women need abortion, right? Women are better off because they have access to it. And so I think we have to really understand on a deep level how much of a lie that is. And I think it starts just kind of theoretically thinking about what this is. If we're killing a human being in an abortion, that means a mother is choosing to kill a child. That can be morally neutral, right? That can't momentary relief, or it gets her out of a difficult situation. There's no world in which that's actually a solution for her or to her problems. That can only harm her and her whole family, and in the end, all of us. But just looking at kind of discrete harms or specific harms that then manifest from abortion, there's the possibility of immediate physical harm, so complications, side effects of having the abortion procedure that happen right then. That's most common with chemical abortions, which are on the rise. They're now more than half of all abortions, and these are abortions women administer to themselves at home. Oftentimes don't have medical follow-up care. They don't know if they're supposed to go to the emergency room. These types of problems can arise immediately. So that's one. There's the possibility of long-term complications. That could be problems in future pregnancies as a result of having had an abortion, which is, not every woman, of course, but certainly some. There's an increased risk of breast cancer among women who have an abortion later in pregnancy. This is well documented, although rejected by abortion rights supporters. There's a clear documented link. And then finally, psychological consequences. And this is something that many women who have abortions grapple with. That's why there's groups like, Project Rachel or the Sisters of Life who help care for these women, many more than just those, help care for these women after the fact. But things like depression, anxiety, alcohol, drug abuse, suicidal ideation, all of these, there's documentation that the rates of experiencing these types of mental health problems increase after abortion, sometimes by over 100%.
Alexandra DeSanctis. So what you're really saying is abortion harms everything and solves nothing. Correct?
Exactly.
We have to leave it there. It's such a joy to have you on the show. Okay. And we hope you come back soon and maybe we could have a larger conversation. We encourage everyone out there. You can buy the book on Amazon or Barnes & Noble when it does come out. You can pre-order it now. The book is Tearing Us Apart: How Abortion Harms Everything and Solves Nothing. The authors, Alexandra DeSanctis and Ryan Anderson, right? He's your co-author on this, Alexandra, correct?
That's right. Yes.
Excellent. And thank you so much for coming on the show. We look forward to having you back. We want to thank you all out there for joining us at the Frontline with Joe and Joe on the Veritas Catholic Radio Network, 1350 on your AM dial, 103.9 on your FM dial. We do have another segment to come. We're going to have another guest on the other side, and we're going to continue the conversation on abortion. So the conversation is not going to end until abortion ends, all right? So we're going to keep talking about it at the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Alexandra, thanks again. Stick around, everybody else. We'll see you on the other side of the